stream to go live. There we go. The stream is live, so hello everyone, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I'm Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike Mateen.
And we have been on a journey. We have been watching our way through the AFI's Top 100 Movies list, the 2007 edition. And we started at 100, gradually made our way, and we have our most recent episode. We discussed movies number 12 and 11, which means all that's left is the top 10. What a long, strange trip it's been. Much longer than I think we originally expected it to be when we decided to start doing this podcast.
Yeah, I don't think that we had any clue it was going to take us, whatever it's taken us, 8 years.
Yeah, I didn't even look up the actual date of the first episode. It's a ways back. I could probably find that if we need. In fact, actually, I'm going to do that right now. But one of the things that we also is a milestone that I don't feel like we actually discussed when it happened is there came a point where we crossed the threshold where both of us had now seen all of the movies on the list. What was the most recent one that you had not seen?
I think it was City Lights.
Oh, okay, so you hadn't seen City Lights, but now you have as of the most recent episode, and so now that was the threshold. I thought it might be, but I didn't want to assume because once we had both updated the spreadsheet, changing the little no to a yes, it was all of a sudden like, oh wait. So I just looked it up. The introductory episode was posted on June 17th, 2010.
10 years.
Yeah. So that's what happens when you sometimes go 18 months between episodes. But so what we decided to do, we have Arkle Studios in the chat saying I lived in a different state when this show started. I know that he's been a fan of the show for a while. So I think that what we discussed last time in our last episode was that before we break into that top 10, we want to revisit our rankings of the movies so far, because I don't know about you, but there's been several times lately when we go to place the last, most recent two movies that we've watched, and I can't help but just notice a couple of movies that just seem like, gosh, I can't really believe I left that movie that high. That seems too high now. Or, hey, I can't believe that this is really so much lower than that. That doesn't seem right. And so it seemed like it was the appropriate move this time to take a revisit of our rankings so far and adjust any inappropriate positions or just remedy any travesties that were laying in wait in these lists.
Yes. So not only did I live in a different state when we started this, I have since lived during this time period in a different country.
Mm-hmm.
I then moved to Arizona, moved from Arizona to Texas, and back to Arizona where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
During this time. So
I lived in North Carolina when we started, and moved to Boston in 2011. So that was a big change for me too. And then there was a whole period where I was, working in South Korea for 6 months, and all that happened. I've had a variety of different projects since then. But yeah, honestly, I think you still got me beat though with actually moving multiple times and living in another country, not just in a hotel.
For 2 of the years of this, yeah.
But so let's talk a little bit about this list. I think once we get to, actually completing the list, we can talk maybe even more about the idea of just like what were your, what were the highlights of the whole project. But some of that, obviously, I think will probably just come up as we go. But in absence of just saying, here's 92 movies to talk about, because we also have our write-in movies that we added. Instead of just having that all in a big pile that's hard to sift through, I propose that we start by looking at them in groups of 10. And maybe we even have this first one start with 12, because technically we've got an extra two.
Yes.
So let's first start with 91 through 102. So each of us will kind of just look at the rankings that we've got in those positions, and just decide, like, how do we feel about those movies in those positions. Sound like a plan?
Sounds good.
All right. Do you want to read your final 12 first, or the
Yeah.
lowest? The 91 through 102.
Yeah. So 91 is I have Cabaret, then Yankee Doodle Dandy, Sunrise, Sophie's Choice, Swing Time, The Gold Rush, Intolerance, Night at the Opera, Double Indemnity, The General, and then off the list would be Sullivan's Travels and The Best Years of Our Lives.
Right. Are there any of those now that, just looking back, thinking back on those movies, that you just feel like, I can't believe that this movie ended up so low. It must be higher than this. Or are there any, like, I think what we should allow ourselves to at this point, although it's probably only going to happen with this segment, is if there's a movie that you just feel like, you know what? Let's take that off the list altogether and put in something else. We can have a second write-in.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that. I mean, all of these I think are fine to be low,
Mm-hmm.
and so it would be just academic to kind of shuffle them around
Mm-hmm.
within this bunch. Like I think, like for example, I could probably drop Yankee Doodle Dandy from 92 down, but
Mm-hmm.
at that point, is that really worth tinkering around with?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel pretty comfortable that these are. And then, but as far as dropping them off the list, like I'm trying to even remember. I don't even remember what Sunrise was about.
Sunrise was the silent movie where there was the guy who was going to, he was tempted to kill his wife on the little boat in the lake because he was going to leave her for his mistress, but then they reconcile. And one of the things that was notable about it is that it used a lot of what we think of as really modern film tricks, with both editing and like compositing special effects and stuff like that. But for a silent movie that came out in 1927, it was pretty advanced from that perspective. So like there
Yeah,
was, I remember it so well just because I had it brought back to the front of my mind recently in another discussion. But like there's the bit where, when he is currently in the scene with his wife, but he's thinking of his mistress, it makes it look like, it uses compositing to make it look like a ghost of her is kind of wrapping her arms around him, and that sort of thing.
right.
That's what Sunrise was.
That's right. So yeah, that's probably fair to be on there. And, and honestly, if I was going to drop one, I think I would probably drop the Gold Rush.
Yeah.
Now that we've seen enough Chaplin,
Hmm.
um, I remember I purposely put, because the general is him too, right?
No, the general was Buster Keaton,
Buster Keaton. That's right.
but Chaplin had Gold Rush, Modern Times, and City Lights. And like, I love the Gold Rush, but it's also true there's 3 Chaplin movies on the list. Do we need all 3?
Yeah,
Maybe
I
we
feel
could
like
drop one and make room for something else.
yeah, I think after having rewatched Modern or not Modern Times, or having seen City Lights now,
Mm-hmm.
thinking back on Modern Times, I feel like those two capture what we want to be remembering Charlie Chaplin for on this list.
Mm-hmm.
And The Gold Rush, while an entertaining movie, I don't think adds anything to the discussion at this point.
Okay.
So I'm willing to take that one off,
Well,
actually.
so I'm going to propose something. It's been kind of invisible for most episodes recently because I haven't been showing the spreadsheet on the screen. I don't know. I guess I could put it on. What do you think? But what I was actually going to suggest is that we're going to be doing so many moves that it might actually be easier if we each kind of handle our own
Yep.
shuffling. But here, let me. Yeah, I'm going to put it on the screen now, just for those of you uh, watching the video version. It's going to take a little bit for me to make it so the text is big enough to be worth looking at. So, so taking Gold Rush off, and none of the others had anything like that you felt just was an absolutely required change.
No, because I'm trying to think like the other ones that have, I think like one, like, yeah, the rest of them, I just like kind of look at them like Sunrise belongs on there.
Mm-hmm.
Sophie's Choice, I think, is,
You know what? That's going to be so small. I'm not sure it's worth it. Never mind.
yeah.
All right.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
So to have the spreadsheet showing on the video, I think is not worth it because it would have to be so small without playing around with it too much. But uh, yeah. So any other changes to that bottom ranking?
no, I think the rest I'm fine with leaving. And
Okay.
again, moving them around in here, I don't think any of them need to move up, and I
Sure.
don't think any others needed to really drop off. So,
Okay. So my bottom 12 here, 91 through 102 is Shane, The Philadelphia Story, The Best Years of Our Lives, Swing Time, Sophie's Choice, The Last Picture Show, MASH, American Graffiti, Cabaret, The General, A Night at the Opera, and Yankee Doodle Dandy. Now, I feel like A Night at the Opera could come off kind of on the same basis that we were just talking about Gold Rush, because we do have Duck Soup still on the list.
mhm.
So the Marx Brothers are represented. Um, I don't feel like there's any others that I have to just like, I'm a little surprised, um, at first to see Sophie's Choice solo, but then I think about our discussion and I kind of remember why that it wasn't, like it has some extremely powerful moments, but it also has some long sections of the movie that are kind of not the powerful moments and sort of feel like, why are we watching this part? This is not the part we care about.
Yeah, I was surprised that to remember that you put Mash and American Graffiti so low.
Yeah. I feel like MASH is important and influential, but I just feel like so much of the humor, even though it was always supposed to be very dark humor, some of it has just aged so poorly that I can't really even laugh at it as dark humor. And I just sort of feel like, like it was a big deal at the time, but it also, a lot of it has not aged well. And then also there's the whole final segment with the football game that just feels like, okay, they just ran out of ideas of what this should be in this movie, so they just added on a whole third act that has nothing to do with anything else, and just because they had the cast all hanging out, it's like it's not terrible, but I just feel like there's lots of other movies on the list that I like a lot more.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then American Graffiti is a movie that, I remember when we talked about it. I think what moves me the most about it is knowing how much my dad likes it, which,
Yeah.
is meaningful. I feel like it does capture a certain vision of the United States at a certain time period, but overall it just feels still kind of slight to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I'm not really gonna shuffle anything else around too much, other than to just go ahead and move Night at the Opera down a little bit, just to kind of, take that down, and then uh, yeah, I think Shane is the only one that I feel like maybe that could be a little higher, you know, maybe, but I don't feel strongly about it either. There's none of the ones that are on there where I just look at it and say, "What? I can't believe it's that low."
Right.
Yeah. All right. So, what about 81 through 90?
So there I've got Duck Soup, Forrest Gump, High Noon, Toy Story, On the Waterfront, Ben-Hur, Last Picture Show, Philadelphia Story, Streetcar Named Desire, and Tootsie.
Mm-hmm.
So I I don't know that any of these need to move. Yeah, so one, I think Toy Story could probably move up.
Yeah.
I just think that that animation is, once we kind of got through it, is pretty underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if that's going to be our representative, I mean that obviously Snow White, but
Yeah.
that's different.
But it's
Uh,
also like it's the only Pixar, but it's the only CGI animated one, which is kind of a new
yeah,
medium of sorts.
yeah, so I'm almost giving it some tangential credit for all of the other movies that are good
Mm-hmm.
like it. And so that one I'm going to move up. I don't know where yet.
Yeah,
I'm
I
drop
feel
it
like
down.
what makes sense for these, just as far as yeah. So
I'm just going to sort down at the bottom
oh
and just
yeah,
call
so
it.
maybe that's a good idea. Is just the ones that we feel like need to move, we'll just put those in a little holding pattern, and then
Yeah.
revisit those at the end and just put them where they belong in the overall ranking.
Yeah, so if I'm going to move something down, I'm going to drop it in my holding pattern and color it yellow. If I plan on moving something up, I'm going to color it green.
I like that pattern.
Um, and then the only other one I was kind of about moving down. I don't know. Tootsie just doesn't quite. I don't know. Just looking at it, I just don't. I remember kind of being not that thrilled with it at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
just kind of being talked into it because we were watching it.
Yeah.
That, oh, it does belong on here, so I think it probably still belongs on the list, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
I just not, I just don't feel it, in
Yeah.
just kind of gut.
Well, I think one of the things that is the case for a lot of these movies is that we're more likely to feel more positive about them when we have watched them recently.
Right.
So I think that there are going to be some cases where looking back something feels too high, but in the moment that's what we felt. But I think what also just tends to happen is that when we have been choosing positions, we'll kind of just arbitrarily pick, scroll down the list until we find two movies that are next to each other where it seems like, yeah, I guess it's better than one but worse than the other. But then when you start comparing it against some of the movies that are higher up or lower down, that's where it starts feeling weird because movies are hard to compare.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, those are the only changes I'll make there. So I'll move Toy Story up and Tootsie down to
All right.
some position.
So my 81 through 90 includes The French Connection, Toy Story, The Deer Hunter, Ben-Hur, The African Queen, North by Northwest, High Noon, Sunrise, Tootsie, and A Streetcar Named Desire. I am honestly right now feeling like I want to move The Deer Hunter down. I mean, I think it does a lot of things that are really important and worth noting, and it's well done, but I just like almost of all the movies on here, I just can't imagine wanting to put that one on at like ever. We watched it for this, and I really can't imagine ever putting it on again.
Yeah.
Which I mean, is that's yeah, everyone's gonna have their own mileage vary there, but I just sort of feel like, yeah, that one I'm not feeling right now, so I think it'll probably come down. Toy Story, I also agree. I feel like maybe could go up. Um, I'm a little surprised looking at it to see North by Northwest so low. But again, I guess that's just another question, kind of like the Chaplin movies, where there's so many Hitchcock movies, right? How many Hitchcock movies do we need?
Yeah, I really like that one though.
Well, hey, you know what? That's totally allowed. One of the things that we talked about when we talked about Psycho is that dude has such an amazing filmography that you could list your top 5 Hitchcock movies and have all 5 of them be different than someone else's top 5.
Right.
So there's so many, and they're all good enough that there's lots of room for just having a favorite, or just personal preferences. Um, like I'm going to make bold strokes here, and move it. You know what? I was just saying I was going to take bold strokes, so and then I almost chickened out. But I'm going to say I'm going to take it down. Maybe even. Well, see, this is where it gets tricky, right? Because I think we want to make a distinction between saying something should be off the list because we want to make room because something is overrepresented, versus saying it's a worse movie than number 100. Right?
So I'm gonna color that. I'm trying to find a different color for that one.
Yeah. You
They're all
can
there's
make
not really
that purple or something.
Yeah, I was trying to find a red that wasn't like a
Yeah.
big strong red, but there really isn't one. There's a light red. There's
Yeah.
light purple though, so I'm with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take North by Northwest off, not because I think it's worse than what's going to end up at 100, but just because let's make some room for some other filmmakers to be represented. Um, you know, there's lots of Hitchcock movies. No one's going to forget about Hitchcock anytime soon. And for that
Right.
matter, all the people. God, I am suddenly blanking. Is it Cary Grant in that one or Jimmy Stewart?
It's Cary Grant.
Okay, somehow I was just like my brain was literally flashing between the two guys, both in that same running away from the airplane scene. All right. I think the Philadelphia Story is the only one that we have where that was we had Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think there's any of the others in this batch that I felt like definitely needed to be changed. So let's go ahead and move on to our next bolus.
Yep. So I've got the Maltese Falcon, City Lights, Shane, Spartacus, Bringing Up Baby, Pulp Fiction, His Girl Friday, Blade Runner, The African Queen, and 12 Angry Men.
Worth noting, perhaps to anyone following along with the AFI's original list, is that His Girl Friday was my write-in selection, so not on the AFI's list, but added to the list based on my suggestion. Your suggestion is further up the list for both of us. But in fact, actually, I think I told you when we recorded that episode that if you hadn't picked Amadeus, that might have been my pick. So
It's just so good.
it is.
So I'm doing something with Spartacus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving it down. I don't know. I haven't decided if it's down or off yet.
We do have a couple of other Kubrick, right? We have at least 2001, obviously.
Yes, we have some other Kubrick, and I also feel, like this is one where like I could almost put Gladiator in here and
Yeah.
be happier with that.
Hmm.
If we're talking about like making room for something new, I think it does a better job in hindsight of that kind of genre. And if you want the epic, we still have Ben-Hur on here for sort of that it's not exactly the same time period, but it does sort of have that sweepingness to it. And we're going to have some pretty epic stuff, films coming up here too. So I'm, from the epic standpoint, I think there are enough epic movies. From the Gladiator standpoint, I think the Gladiator is in current times a better Gladiator movie. So that's kind of, I know there are other pieces to it, but I just, those are the things that I remember about it. Um, and I'm happy, you know, taking it off. I feel like also some of the things, while it was important at the time, I think some of it's, how do I want to put it? Like some of the Tony Curtis type scenes, that kind of opened those conversations. I don't think we need it on here anymore. You
Hmm.
know, for trying to, sort of subtly introduce that sexuality piece to the movies or whatever. I just don't think it. Well, I think it said like what was important at the time. I just don't think it is. I don't think it needs to be on here anymore. So that's kind of. I think I just talked myself into dropping it all the way off actually. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And this is again one of those where it's not. It's not that I dislike the movie or I think there's something flawed in it. It's just I think there are other movies that can do what it does on this list for me. Um, so I'm comfortable. Some of these, I think I would probably want to take Pulp Fiction down, but just like when we watched it, like you have to. I think it still needs its credit for what
Mm-hmm.
it did, even if I don't enjoy it as much anymore. Um, Blade Runner, I would love to move up, but it just doesn't deserve it. I mean, it's it's one of those like where I would throw that movie on in a heartbeat and watch it any day of the week. Same with the African Queen, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, there are just technically better movies above it, I think. And
Sure.
so actually, I might give Blade Runner a little bump, like maybe nothing crazy, but I am actually gonna. I just talked myself into it. I'm gonna put it down here on my move up,
Okay.
but I'm not gonna move it up nearly as much as like Toy Story. I'm just gonna move. This is a you know what? I just really like this movie, so I'm going to move
Sure. Hey, that
it
is
up.
100% allowed. So,
uh,
my rankings for 71 through 80 are The Apartment, Spartacus, Duck Soup, All the President's Men, Easy Rider, The Gold Rush, Bringing Up Baby, Platoon, Double Indemnity, and Sullivan's Travels. One uh, a movie that feels a little bit weird to be talking about taking off the list, but by the same logic that we've kind of just been talking about, got a bunch of Billy Wilder movies. Do we need all those Billy Wilder movies?
no.
So if we were going to take off, like because we've got The Apartment, and then we've also got, they're all, Some Like It Hot and Sunset Boulevard, and shoot, there's one more I think, right? I can't remember now. But I think there's another one. So out of all of those, like, do we need all of them? That I just in the interest of kind of making big decisions rather than hedging everything, I'm going to go ahead and take that one off by that same whole rationale.
Oh, Double Indemnity was him too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, so maybe then instead of what I just did, which was The Apartment, I had that higher than Double Indemnity. But now let me think. Which do I think is more worthy? Double Indemnity or The Apartment? I feel like The Apartment does a more interesting thing. Like Double Indemnity, I love as kind of a noir. But there are other movies that kind of do things like that. Whereas I can't really think of many other movies that are like The Apartment.
I'm in
So,
agreement. I'm
uh,
actually going to go and I'm going to take Double Indemnity off of mine too after
mm,
that discussion.
all right. And so then let's see. I feel like I know Platoon is much higher on the list for you. um,
I really like it, but
well,
yeah,
yeah, and that's one of the things that's neat about all of this is um,
I'm right
uh,
here.
is just how when we're talking about all good movies, uh, it's just it's going to just come down to preference a lot of the time,
Yep.
right? So I feel like I'm pretty good with everything else on there. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what we talked about. I think Platoon. not only is it a good war movie, but I feel like it does such a great job of speaking to across generations, even though it's about Vietnam. Like it feels like to me like the same kind of decision about like whether you wanted to like it feels like I could be that character basically.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I wasn't obviously a draft age in Vietnam, and because again he wasn't drafted, he chose to go. Like there's just it I don't know, it works for me. So anyway, we don't have to relitigate the movie, but I
Well,
just
you'll have an opportunity to talk more about Platoon further up the list too when we get
yep.
to it on yours. But yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about our next grouping with 61 to 70.
Yep. So West Side Story, The Wild Bunch, French Connection, Do the Right Thing, The Deer Hunter, Network, The Apartment, In the Heat of the Night, Easy Rider, and Saving Private Ryan. So I I hear what you're saying with the Deer Hunter. I just think I don't know. There's just a lot of powerful stuff in that,
Yep.
so it's hard for me to move that. I This is one of the crazier ones on here. I'm actually prepared to move Do the Right Thing up.
Mm-hmm.
I
I'm going to do the same, I'll tell you, because I actually also have it in this grouping, so I agree with you. I recently, not to step on your toes, but just what we could both talk about that movie now. I was recently doing a Twitter like 30-day film challenge, and one of them was a movie that changed your life. And honestly, what came to mind for me was Do the Right Thing, just because it's like the amount of times that I have revisited my feelings about that movie, even since our discussion of it, especially in light of all sorts of current events and everything, it just feels so important and prescient, and I just keep revisiting it in my head.
yeah, and I think I was because the movie is like trying to really has like a lot of shock value to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was underrating some of the parts that I felt like the movie was trying to say, like, well, this group is in the right and this group is in the wrong. Whereas I felt like both groups were kind of wrong. I think that the movie, in hindsight, actually does a better job of that than I was giving it credit for. I was just looking at it from a lens of feeling like it was trying to preach something to me.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it, I think it actually painted a pretty good canvas to just take it not at face value, but to
Mm-hmm.
see the complexities in it that I wasn't giving it credit for a very long time.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the fact that it stirred those emotions in me, you got to give the movie credit for that too.
Yeah.
You know, so I knocked this movie for a very long time because I was just convinced that he was trying to convince us that one side was right and one was wrong when I just didn't agree with that. And and yeah, I've revisited it over and over and over again, like you said, since we've talked about it. You're right. It's just I feel like it needs to be higher, and it's not just because of things that are going on in society now, but I think that that kind of re-heightens
Yeah.
how much he captured that 20, 30, whatever, 30 years ago, and how not much has changed from the complexities of those relationships.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just think it definitely deserves to be higher. Everything else on here, I think I'm good with. I think the rest of these are kind of where they belong. I
Mm-hmm.
think Saving Private Ryan's a phenomenal war movie, but it's yeah, it makes the top 70. I mean,
Yeah.
that's still a pretty good spot. Easy Rider, I like. Did a couple of things, but again, I think it's in the right. I think it's in the right place for me. So
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So for my grouping of 61 to 70 includes Saving Private Ryan, The Silence of the Lambs, The Godfather Part 2, Bonnie and Clyde, The Wild Bunch, 12 Angry Men, Goodfellas, Do the Right Thing, The Sound of Music, and Forrest Gump. The one that leaps out at me is Forrest Gump, and I remember our discussion about it when we had that episode was that I came into it saying I remember a lot of things about this. I loved it when I first saw it in high school. And then as I got older, I kind of started disliking a lot of the other things it does. But then when we rewatched it, it's like, oh, but I remember there's all these other parts that are actually also really good. But that was when I was fresh off of its emotional manipulation. And now that I have the distance again, I'm going to move it down.
Yeah. I was thinking about doing it, but I felt like I had it pretty far down already and that it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
worth doing. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But I totally agree with you. It it does some interesting things. I think it still belongs on the list because of the just the film
Yeah.
technique and even some of the manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just it trivializes things in a way that I just don't feel like gives them their rightful credit.
Mm-hmm.
To try to maneuver this story.
Yeah.
So
In the chat, Arkle is actually saying, "Did either of you see the Renegade Cut episode about Forrest Gump? Oof, that movie is not aged well, to put it kindly." I haven't seen Renegade Cut. I am not really familiar with the show, but agreed that there are huge parts of Forrest Gump that are not. You revisit it now and just say, "Wow, that's like, yeah, we know that Forrest is supposed to be kind of a naive character, but the movie's not supposed to be naive with him."
right. And
So
like I said, it trivializes things that like makes humor out of the Watergate break-in. Like is just like an example of like one where it's like, is that really? I mean, I get what they're trying to do, but is that really necessary? I mean, it's
yeah,
not. That's not a
well,
trivial thing. Like it's not.
right, and honestly, the parts of that movie that do work are basically in two buckets, right? One is all the technical effects wizardry, which is pretty good, especially like at the time. It was like, oh my god, people had never seen that before, right? Like it was pretty impressive. So that, like, I think has aged fine in the sense that it was important in that regard, and it still looks pretty good. On the other hand, though, the stuff that still kind of works is mostly the stuff that is more or less kind of straightforward emotional melodrama, which doesn't make it bad, but it also is less remarkable.
Yep.
So yeah, that one I think is going to move down. Um, do the right thing. I'm with you. That's going to move up, and I think a lot of the others here I feel like I have in about the right place. Um, Sullivan's Travels, I think I'm going to move down, but not far. Like, I don't feel dramatic, you know, I'm not angry about it. It's more just kind of like, you know what? I don't think about it very much.
Yeah, I agree.
hmm
And I think I had it pretty low already, which is why it kind of caught my eye when I got it. But I was like, I
Yeah.
don't feel like I need to drop it
Yeah,
off. It's
you,
just
you
not,
already had it at 101, so yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Uh,
yeah, that's
and then, like Godfather Part 2, like, I'm not going to move it down, but those movies just don't work on me the way they work on a lot of people, and that's I that's not saying bad things about those movies. Again, it's like what we're saying is, personal preference comes into it, and those are movies that I can admire without enjoying in the same way that I actually enjoy a lot of the other movies. And so on that basis, I almost could see it going lower than this, but I'm going to leave it where it is because I can still actually admire and respect a lot of the craft that goes into it, even as I feel like I really don't care about any of the characters in it.
fair enough.
Yeah.
I do not agree, but we've had
Well,
that
yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we get to have it again because The Godfather Part 1 is number 2 on the list. So,
Yeah.
all right. But yeah, otherwise, I think everything else there I'm pretty happy with. The only last thing I'll mention without moving the movie is that The Silence of the Lambs just makes me think about how the Hannibal TV show is now on Netflix, and I feel like I want to rewatch that because it was really good.
Mm.
Okay, so let's talk about 51 through 60.
Okay. So here is where I have American Graffiti and North by Northwest. E.T. It happened one night. Nashville, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Modern Times, Sixth Sense, Goodfellas, King Kong, and I was
Uh,
about to say West Side Story, but
yeah,
that
that
was
was that was in the previous group. Yeah.
so. I I still want to move ET down, but
Mm,
it's fine. It's not worth. I think I am going to move Modern Times up though after
okay.
our last Chaplin
Mm-hmm.
conversation, and let's put that where it's supposed to be in here. That is up. Up. That's a good animated movie.
Yeah, it is. I like that one.
uh, yeah, Sixth Sense and Goodfellas. Those are probably appropriate places for both of those. I like
Mm-hmm.
those. King Kong's moving down. I can't move it off though, just because of its place in
Well,
culture.
that's
You know?
that's a good example of a movie. I think that while there's no question that it's influential in the sense that it really invented a lot of tropes that are still in use today, but it, for the most part, has been surpassed, right? There are other movies now that do what it did better.
Yeah,
It was just, you know, and it wasn't even really first. It was just kind of like first to do it really well.
yeah, and I think
I mean, I have it higher up on the list, so I think didn't do I
the
or
fact
did
that like even last time I went to Universal Studios, they've even removed the King Kong ride. Like
mm,
it's kind of served its part. People know what it is,
yeah.
but it's just not front and center anymore.
I can see that. I have it much higher on the list still, so we'll see.
Yeah, I yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not guaranteeing I'm taking it off because it is King Kong. Like it is just part of our cultural touch points in
Yeah.
movies.
Well, and
So
when we watched it for this show, that was the first time I had seen that one, so that might be part of why I have it so high.
true, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Is that got you covered?
yep, that's got me for that one.
All right. So my 51 through 60 is Annie Hall, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Sixth Sense, Blade Runner, City Lights, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Nashville, In the Heat of the Night, Unforgiven, and West Side Story. Uh, I feel like I feel like most of those I feel pretty good about those positions. I feel like Blade Runner maybe could be higher.
That's kind of where I was too. Like I feel like it could be higher, but it's yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. But
I
I
feel
eventually just moved
you
it.
know what,
Yeah,
I'm gonna decide to move that one up just because one of the things that I said about some of the others when I was moving them down or off the list was it's like, but I really would never watch it again, or I really don't think about it very much. I think about Blade Runner, and I have rewatched it several times and would again.
oh
Maybe
yeah,
that merits a higher position on the list. Um, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I feel like for Capra movies, we obviously have It's a Wonderful Life, that's much higher on the list for both of us. You know what? I feel like it's as high as it is on the list for me, partly just because I kind of was expecting it to be more schmaltzy than it actually is. And so it kind of pleasantly surprised me there. But it's also kind of it's weird. You know what? I'm going to leave it where it is. I'm not going to move it, but just revisit, thinking more about it, it's like I think that one's maybe a little bit on the bubble by the same token that we've talked about moving some of the others just because I feel like we've got a Capra that I like more still on the list. And we've certainly got representation from Jimmy Stewart elsewhere on the list, right? So,
yep.
so like, what do we lose by removing that one? I don't know, not that much necessarily, but I'll go ahead and leave it. It's it was on the bubble, but I decided to not not drop it off altogether. Um, yeah, okay, so I'll leave it there. And I'll leave City Lights where it is too, because I feel like it's okay to have two Charlie Chaplin movies.
Yep.
Um, all right, so let's talk about our next grouping here.
All right. So at 41, I have Amadeus, which was my write-in.
Hmm.
Then Raiders of the Lost Ark, Shawshank Redemption, MASH, Annie Hall, Bonnie and Clyde, Rear Window, Titanic, All the President's Men, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So I kind of want to drop Annie Hall, I think,
Hmm.
but not part of it's looking at it in the context of these movies because this, for whatever reason, ended up being like a sweet spot of like movies I just passionately enjoy, um, but don't necessarily deserve to be higher on the list.
Yeah.
And it's funny that it really kind of like other. I mean, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is probably not in that as well, but
Mm.
I like that movie. But I mean, Amadeus, Raiders, Shawshank, MASH, Bonnie and Clyde, Rear Window, Titanic, All the President's Men. I mean, these are movies that I have seen at least 10 times each, if not more. Um, and so it's funny that I kind of stacked them all in here where it's like, yeah, let's get them in the top half of the list because I love them and they're really well done, but they're not, maybe not ready to move into the upper. And Annie Hall just doesn't fit that bill. So it's going to go down to somewhere. I just don't know
Yeah.
where yet.
I had that in my last section. It was at number 51, and it is again another one where we talked about it when we had that episode that obviously talking about Woody Allen movies is more complex than it used to be, although it, maybe it really always should have been, but
Yeah.
but at the same time, like that movie really I just epitomizes a certain style of filmmaking that it's hard to think of someone else who makes that kind of movie in as iconic a way as Annie Hall is. You know?
Yeah, I agree, which is why it's probably going to stay on the list. It's
Yeah.
just I don't
Yeah.
I don't want it in this grouping of 10 because it just doesn't fit. I mean,
Yeah.
this is I really I like that this is where these are. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, putting them in the top half but not all the way up is appropriate for all of those movies,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep. So my 41 through 50 is Taxi Driver, The Graduate, Midnight Cowboy, It Happened One Night, Network, Titanic, Modern Times, Pulp Fiction, Fellowship of the Ring, and Rear Window. And this is where some of them start to get hard. But I am definitely, I'm actually going to move Titanic up. I actually just watched a YouTube video from a YouTuber called named Lindsay Ellis, no relation, and she was basically decided to make a whole 45-minute video about how Titanic is good actually. And despite the fact that it got this huge backlash for being so popular, it's actually really good. And just rewatching that just reminded me, it's like, yes, I actually do really like it. And there are things about it that you can poke fun at, but they are pretty much all pleasant things. And pretty much every, like, aggressive complaint I've heard about it, I disagree with, and especially the whole thing about the door and Jack could have lived. That whole thing was just stupid, and I believe I complained about it when we had that episode.
Yes, it doesn't matter
Well, the movie
ultimately.
the movie tells us that it's not big enough. It does not matter if people math nerds did uh, math about it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter because the movie shows us Jack trying to climb on and it's sinking. So he decides that it's not like that that if he climbed on it, it would sink too much. We see
Right.
that happen in the movie. Why do people think that they can argue with what they just saw on screen? Anyway,
But it's
um,
part of the testament to the movie. I mean,
yeah,
it got people.
yeah. Anyway, so I'm gonna move that one up, and then I think I'm also gonna move Modern Times up. Um, I feel like that one is as low as it is, not because I really ever wanted it to be in the 40s, but just because it kind of kept getting bumped down the list as we added more stuff, you know? And especially just since watching City Lights reminded me of how much I like Modern Times. That's kind of where I'm at with that one.
That
Um,
works.
Rear Window, again, it's like we could talk about how many Hitchcock movies we need, but Rear Window I would never take completely off the list because it was, first of all, it was the first Alfred Hitchcock movie I ever saw. And I saw it at your house when we were kids. And I didn't believe that Alfred Hitchcock, like, well, that sounds like it's going to be some boring old movie. And then it turns out it was really good, and I liked it even as a kid. So not taking it off the list. It's
Good.
also really good. So there's that. I think it's interesting to have Fellowship of the Ring there, just because I believe that is the most recent movie that's on the list. Came out in 2001. I don't think there were any that were newer than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it raises the question too. Actually, one of the things that we might talk about is it's been 13 years since they put out this list. What movies that have come out since then maybe ought to be on the list?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we do that after we complete it.
Yeah, I like that. All right, so I think the rest of these, though, uh, yeah, I think the rest of these I'm gonna leave where they are.
Okay.
Just seeing network there, not that I want to move it, but I'm just like, it's one of those where it's like I see that and I go, ah, yes, network. It's a good movie. All right, so let's talk about. Oh well, so here, let's just briefly talk about how Amadeus was your write-in, but then you ended up with it here at 41. Is
Yeah.
that, which is, it's allowed. You didn't have to write it in to be in higher than that, but it is just, I think the only reason I pointed out is because that's um, that was your write-in, but I have it much higher on my list than you have on yours.
I mean, yeah, I'm fine with it there.
Yeah.
I feel like it's an appropriate place for it.
Yeah.
It's a really good movie.
We
It's
could
very
argue again
entertaining.
about whether the director's cut or the theatrical cut is better. Let's not.
Let's not.
Let's move
So
on then to
31.
31 through 40.
So I have The Searchers at 31. Then Rocky, Clockwork Orange, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Sound of Music, Unforgiven, Midnight Cowboy, Butch Cassidy, Silence of the Lambs, and Platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's weird that I have like a lot of the westerns kind of grouped in here.
Hmm.
Um, or three. I mean,
Well, like Midnight Cowboy is not actually a western, but it kind of
no, I'm
feels
thinking
like one looking
Searchers,
at the title.
Unforgiven, Butch Cassidy. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're gonna
But
move
yeah,
Platoon up
Midnight
just to
Cowboy.
spite me, or?
Yeah. um, phew. I yeah, I think. I mean, Clockwork Orange is one of those ones that I would love to move up, but I don't think it needs to be up,
Mm.
and I don't love it enough to want to do that. Um, Platoon, I thought I was gonna move up, but I like honestly, like I would move it up like in this grouping, so it's not even worth it.
Well, we're already taking Spartacus off the list as far as Kubrick, so you don't have to do anything with Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave all these.
Okay.
I don't see anything, and nothing jumps here as
All right.
like me wanting to get it out of here,
Mm-hmm.
one way or the other. So
Yeah. All right. So my 10 movies here are All About Eve, The Maltese Falcon, Sunset Boulevard, The Searchers, E.T., Intolerance, A Clockwork Orange, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Rocky, and Jaws. Now, the one of these that was frankly the inspiration for doing this episode is that I cannot believe I left E.T. that high. I just, we watched it not even all that long ago, and I remember going into it this time with feeling like I'm not sure I even really like it. But then watching it and saying, oh, okay, I still don't like the parts I don't like, but there's a lot of it that's really good. But again, it's like once I'm away from the glow of Spielberg's emotional manipulation, I mostly just remember the parts I don't like again. It's like you get this little sort of warm aura that hangs on you for a little while, but then when that goes away, it's like, hey, wait a minute, what just happened? Did that movie just trick me again into thinking I like it more than I do? So I'm definitely moving that one down. And I think I'm going to move Jaws up. Where is it? Yeah. I think I'm going to move Jaws up. I have half a mind to move Rocky up also. No, I think maybe I'll leave that where it is. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like, A Clockwork Orange is another one where I sort of feel like I don't feel strongly about moving it down, but I'm also not really, like when I see it on the list, there's not me going, "Oh, Clockwork Orange, I love that movie." It's more like, yeah, just compared to others, it's like it
Mhm.
does a lot of really interesting things. I think I am going to go ahead and move that down, and I'm going to move both Rocky and Jaws up. Lots of changes for this one for me. All right, next.
All right. So 21, I have 2001, Sunset Boulevard,
Mm-hmm.
Grapes of Wrath, Jaws, Lord of the Rings, To Kill a Mockingbird, Some Like It Hot, All About Eve, Snow White, Doctor Strangelove.
Mm-hmm.
So I am going to move the Grapes of Wrath down. And similar, I mean, I don't feel like the movie like emotionally manipulates you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that one I left higher because of recency. I mean, it's a good movie, but
Yeah.
it's once you've kind of left, well, at least once I've left it for a while, I don't know, I'm just less
Mm-hmm.
taken by it, and honestly, the same with 2001.
Right. Well, so uh, Grapes of Wrath was William Wyler, right? Same. Wait. Okay. Now I can't remember. I'm gonna look it up. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think I 2001 is good. I just don't know if it's number 21 good for me,
mm,
honestly, anymore.
yeah.
Just again, once you kind of just having we it wasn't that long since we watched it, but just even thinking back on watching it and remembering, while there are some stuff that is really really good, I mean, there's some just like, I mean, there's parts of that movie that are just like,
John. Okay. Yeah. John Ford. I knew we watched another movie by the same director recently, and for some reason I was not placing it. So yeah, The Searchers was John Ford.
yeah. I feel like I like The Searchers better, so I'm going to move it down below The Searchers at some
Yeah.
point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, 2001. It's just, yeah, all the things that we kind of joked about, like having to be in the mood for it, like it reminds you when you're
Mm-hmm.
just thinking about it when you're not in the mood for it. I I don't know. It just, and it's not going to go like terribly far down. I know obviously you have it fairly high. I'm not arguing against its place on the list. I just don't feel it at 21. So
Mm-hmm. Sure. All right. So my movies for 21 through 30: The Grapes of Wrath, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Psycho, Chinatown, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, King Kong, On the Waterfront, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, To Kill a Mockingbird, and The Bridge on the River Kwai. I feel like, there's half an instinct I have to move Bridge on the River Kwai down, but I think that I'm actually biased by. I listened to the Unspooled episode on that movie recently, and they were not as hot on it. But I feel like that's more reflecting on their opinions rather than my own on it. Although I think it's also true that there are big chunks of that movie that really don't have anything to do with the rest of it. That it's more like, hey, let's have the adventure travelogue with the American guy. Um, but that's all right. It's still a very good movie. I have the Grapes of Wrath pretty high, and I have it higher than I have the Searchers right now. Let me think. How do I feel about the two of those in comparison? I tend to agree. I feel like the Grapes of Wrath is really good, but like if we were going to have one John Ford movie over the other, like I do like Searchers more, I think. So by the same logic, I'll move that down. And let's see. So I like a lot of those others pretty much where they are, I think. Um, yeah. Um, I recently did see a tweet, though, that was basically saying, hot take, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is better than Chinatown. And
I like that.
there's
I
a
mean,
part
I
of
like
me
that.
that really likes that. You know what I mean? Like, likes that as a take. Like, because obviously they're telling extreme, like, there's a lot of overlap in the plot lines of those movies, right? Like the whole scheme that's behind everything. You know, Roger Rabbit is obviously took Chinatown's mystery as a template for the one in there, and then added all sorts of other silly stuff on it. But I tell you right now, I would rewatch Who Framed Roger Rabbit before I'd rewatch Chinatown again. Not that Chinatown's bad, but just of the two.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that. So,
Oh, well,
yeah.
that's fair. You don't have to move Chinatown. I'm not actually going to move Chinatown either, so much as I'm thinking maybe I want to have Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the list. So
I mean, I think
we're
we're gonna have to think hard about some animated representation.
yeah,
Honestly,
yeah. No, I agree. I feel like there's a lot of really great animated movies that are not on this list at all because it seems like they felt like, well, we have Snow White and we have Toy Story and that's enough. And it's like, is it though? I don't think so.
yeah.
So uh, we are just kind of, you know, getting down to the last little bits, right? So let's talk about the next 10 here is 11 to 20. And so we will have moved through the entire list of what we've talked about so far.
Yep. So I have Star Wars, Psycho, Graduate, Wonderful Life, Chinatown, Apocalypse Now, Godfather 2, Bridge on the River Kwai, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and Taxi Driver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only one that I was even sort of up in the air on here was Treasure of the Sierra Madre, but nah, I'm not going to touch it. I was thinking about moving it down, but everything else I'm good with because anything that could move up will just naturally move up as we cycle in the other movies, you know. So
Mm-hmm. All right. So my movies here we both have Star Wars as the highest on the list so far, which I'll go ahead. So I got Star Wars 2001, Doctor Strangelove, Apocalypse Now, It's a Wonderful Life, Shawshank Redemption, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Amadeus, His Girl Friday, and Some Like It Hot. Now, some weird things just about how that all happened is like two sci-fi movies back to back with Star Wars in 2001, even though obviously they're very different sci-fi movies. But then I've also got 2001 and Doctor Strangelove right next to each other, which uh, are both Kubrick films.
mm-hmm.
Um, I I'm
Well, I was going to
surprised.
mention I have Apocalypse Now and Godfather Part 2 back to back, which are
That's
both
true.
Cowboys.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I look at Shawshank Redemption on there, and I feel like as much as I do love it, that's too high. I
Yeah.
think. So I'm gonna move that down. Probably not too far, but I love it. I love a lot of things about it, but it's just not. it's not
It's not top
there.
15, yeah, or
Um,
top 16, yeah.
so we've had a question in chat about a couple of movies that aren't on the list here.
Oh,
Part of just as a uh, just a revisiting for those who might be new to the show. What we are doing is watching the American Film Institute's top 100 movies. So that's the list that we're working with. So there are going to be some movies that might be great but aren't on the list because it's their list. So and we're just talking about our rankings of those movies generally. Okay, so I feel like I'm a little surprised to see It's a Wonderful Life so high, but then again, it's like we just watched it and I loved it that much more, So it's just like, it, that's one of those movies that I think it's kind of amazing how well it has endured, and you think about the public consciousness of it, and it seems like, oh sure, it's like everybody knows it though. It's so cheesy, and like why are why would that be so high? But then you actually watch it and it's like, oh yeah, that's why, because it's really good.
yes. And
Uh,
I think I had the same thing. Like, I think I'm surprised about how, just reminded of how intricate the plot line is.
mm-hmm,
Because at the end of it, you feel like it's pretty, like, again, the schmaltzy, so you feel like it's a simplistic movie because it leaves you with a very simple emotion, which is a powerful one. But then when you watch it, it's like, no, it gets there in a very, very good way. Like, it earns it,
mm-hmm,
you know?
yeah. Well, and I think it's telling that both of us, after all of this, have it so high, right? Sneak preview for next time. I actually felt similarly about The Wizard of Oz. I didn't expect it to enjoy rewatching it as much as I did, but that's what we'll be talking about next time.
Good.
So I'm happy looking at Raiders of the Lost Ark having that so high. All of these others are all just super good, and even though it feels a little bit weird looking at that like having Star Wars so high, there's a part of me that wants to just say, like, do I really think Star Wars is like that high in the best movies of all time? And yet I sort of feel like we just watched that one not long ago and put it there because that's how we felt about it coming off of that. And and that's with all of the dilution that has gone on over the years with the Star Wars, like, and to still have that one, even with all of its quirks with the enhanced edition and everything. I don't know. So I guess I'm gonna leave it there. It feels weird, but I put it there from a sincere emotional reaction, and I don't
Yeah.
know what I want to put in front of it in terms of.
Well, and from the dilution standpoint, I mean, the fact is that one movie launched an alternate, like, universe that people have, studied and written about. Like, I mean, I mean, even more than the Lord of the Rings,
Mm-hmm.
and the Hobbit and that whole side of it. Like, it is unbelievable what that created.
So just before we started recording, I had just finished watching the last episode of Star Wars Rebels, the animated show, um, which is not actually brand new. I mean, it had been on there a little bit, but yeah, it's it's Star Wars endures. So that's important. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna leave everything else pretty much where it is there. Um, yeah. All right, so let's go back down to the movies that we decided to, move or readjust and kind of just start putting those back in the sequence in their new locations. So we do you. I feel like we can't both just be staring at it. We want to have talking. But if I can kind of. Do you want to just kind of just talk through our process as you place each one?
Yeah, so I'm looking at, like, basically my top opening and
Mm-hmm.
saying, okay, my top opening is 21 and then 23.
Mm-hmm.
What
I think you
In,
can. You don't have to just swap out. You can, shift other things down. Like if you wanted to put
that
it
just
in.
feels more complicated though at this point. So
Well, yeah, that's fair. But I would say you can put it wherever you want. If you want to put it back in those openings, that's totally cool.
yeah, I mean, I think because of what we talked about how much I've thought about Do the Right Thing, like I'm actually going to put that one into my 21 spot.
Hmm.
And then Toy Story again for the time being as the best animated representation of modern animation. I'm going to put that into 23. I mean, these are going significantly up, but I think
Hmm.
they've earned this.
Yeah.
Um, my next spot is 45. I'm good with Blade Runner there. And then 57 is where I'll move, but Modern Times, which is probably actually too low for it. So I am going to change here. I'm going to put it right at 50. I'm sorry, I'm going to move these down.
All right.
And then delete this row.
Yeah.
Did I delete yours too? Yeah,
I don't.
yeah I
Yeah,
did.
I think you. Yeah, you're you're adjusting a couple of things there.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to straighten it up after we're done. Okay. And
Yeah.
then once I want to move down, oh, I still have 2001. I don't want to put that far down. So 2001, I'm going to move.
Yeah. See that this is the problem with that. Well, I don't know. Never mind. It's fine. You do it however you want.
Uh, yeah, I don't really know. Why don't you do a couple?
My only complaint there was my instinct that you were going to move 2001 too far down, and I like had this knee jerk reaction of wanting to object.
Right. No, I started to see the problem with that, just putting them in the slots. Yeah, because then you're forced to say, okay, who goes into that slot? Yeah. And when I was doing all the moving ups first, then I take all the best spots. Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Um,
it's so like something that you might want to move from 16 to 25, but if you moved all the ones up, then all of a sudden you're moving it from 16 to 65 or something.
right.
But, that's fine too though. So, I think as far as the ones that I'm moving up, I have some of the same movies there. So, I have like Toy Story, Do the Right Thing, Titanic, Modern Times, Rocky, and Jaws are all movies that I'm moving up. I think if I'm going to rank those, Rocky and Jaws are both just amazing movies that I could watch over and over again. I have a lot of deep fondness for them. But as far as the question of like how important are they as films compared to all of this list of other also great important films, right? I feel like so they're going to go up from where they were. Although I didn't actually pay attention to where I took them from, so I think I took those from the lower 40s. So you know what? I'm going to take the two of those, and I'm going to just go ahead and move those up to like the low 40s. So I've got spots open right now at 39 and 40. So I'm literally just gonna I'm gonna swap them though. Now that I look at it, I'm gonna put Jaws over Rocky. I was just thinking about Jaws again recently. Um, it's such a good movie. I love that movie. I'm also gonna put Do the Right Thing up really high just because I feel like it's just this well of nuance and complexity that just keeps coming back to mind in all sorts of circumstances and just keeps revealing new depths for me. You know what? I'm actually putting it at the same spot that you just put it, 21.
Yeah. I mean, I
And
think that's a great spot for it. Yeah. I mean, it not quite a top 20 movie of all time, but just right on the
yeah,
doorstep. Yeah.
I'm gonna move Modern Times up to the highest sort of new, like new opening spot, so to speak. which puts it around 16. I'm kind of doing the same thing you were doing, which is just putting them back in
I mean, you have to start
vacated
somewhere.
slots.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? It's like the stakes are low on this list.
Exactly, and I've already inserted a bunch of extra rows and stuff that you're gonna have to
Yeah.
clean up too.
Well,
So
it's fine. We'll do that. So I think I'm gonna put Toy Story. It was relatively low, so I think I'm gonna put that around 46, and that's considerably higher than it was, and I feel like I'm okay with it there. And then Titanic. I just suddenly flashed on. There's a lyric of Avenue Q, the musical,
hmm
where one of the characters is making a mixtape for another character, and there's a theme song. "My Heart Will Go On" was on the mixtape, and she goes, "Oh, I love Titanic," and he goes, "It was all right." Like he's, and I just it suddenly made me think of that. So I'm gonna put that. You know what? I'm actually gonna move. I'm gonna put Titanic around 47, but I'm actually gonna move Toy Story up to like 35. And you know what? I'm gonna I'm just gonna go ahead and say that's where those go. Yeah, those extra rows are gonna mess me up a little bit. I'll figure out how to clean that up at some point.
I mean, I think yeah, if you eventually just like
Well, once we're not moving anything else around.
yeah, you can just cut and paste it somewhere, and yeah,
Yeah. And so Night at the Opera, North by Northwest, and Double Indemnity were the ones that we kind of said, you know what, let's go ahead and just leave those off. And again, not necessarily because they are worse as movies than everything else that stays on the list, but just because we can make a little room. We want the list to not just be like a ranking of just these are the 100 best, but also like to be representative of a lot of different aspects of Hollywood. And we kind of had that conversation already, so I don't probably need to revisit it. I'm going to take Forrest Gump and put it in the lowest vacancy of all of these, which has it at about 101. Although it'll probably move up since we took some of the others out of the list. I just, like it does some things really well, but that stuff just fades. Um, kind of like with ET, which I'm going to put at like 79. Um, Shawshank Redemption, I feel like can still go reasonably high. I'm going to put that at 46, which I think is more fair than like the 16 or whatever I had it at. And let's see, Deer Hunter, I feel like I'm going to have that like 86. Although I feel like that's actually not much lower than it was originally.
it's a little bit.
Yeah. I'm going to put Blade Runner. What just happened? Oops.
I was just changing colors on some stuff.
Okay, I think we had, our Google spreadsheet had some conflicting edits for a moment. I'm going to put Blade Runner at, you know what? I'm actually going to move it higher than that. I'm going to put Blade Runner. I don't, you know what? I colored Blade Runner wrong. I colored it the color for moving something down, but I think I was actually moving it up all along. So
You were planning on moving it up, yeah.
yeah, that was the plan. So that's going to go at 37. And yeah, okay, so making some progress here. Grapes of Wrath, I feel like fits better at like 70, around there. And then I'm going to take Sullivan's Travels can go like 82, and Clockwork Orange at 68. And those are I think those are all. We still have I still have the gaps left behind by the others, so things are going to shift a little bit up. So let me see if I can now resolve all of these extra rows that you added and fix that. Okay. And then, okay. So we've got, oops. Yeah, so I think we have you have some more that you
Yeah, I
Want to
just
do
drop
some?
them in.
Okay.
Um, King Kong, Annie Hall, and Grapes of Wrath. I just dropped in like 85 to 100, a couple
Mm-hmm.
of different spots there. And I, I don't know why. I just felt like I took Tootsie off the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to honestly wanted to make 5 spots, but I'm settling for 4 open spots right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then maybe when we go through and try to pick the whatever the ones we want to put on there,
Sure.
we'll see if there's 4 or 5 movies that we want to move into the
Yeah.
things.
So I'm shifting everything up so that I'm not leaving empty spaces.
Yeah, go ahead and
Um,
do that too if you want.
yeah. So I think uh, I removed 3 from the list. You're removing 4, right?
Yep.
Um, let's both. If it makes. Do you? How about this? I'll take one more out, and then we'll both have removed 4, and then we can talk about like what goes in that spot. Well, for that matter, we had already added 2, so it was 102. So if we take out just 2, then we're back at 100.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's more that we could add to. So let's not worry too much about it right now. How about that? We've got some empty spaces. We'll talk about adding more in at some point. But yeah, so now I feel like looking back at the new ranking that we've got, we moved some stuff around. There's now some of the ones that I really look back on the most fondly are no longer so far down on the list, and the ones that the glow has worn off are not so high. And that might still change again, but yeah, I feel a little better now.
Yep. Me too. I'm good. I like it.
Great. So next time we'll crack the top 10. So the next 2 movies we are going to be watching are The Wizard of Oz at number 10 and Vertigo at number 9. Vertigo is the highest ranked of 4 Hitchcock movies. Uh, the The Wizard of Oz obviously is The Wizard of Oz. um, and so we'll be back to talk about those in probably 2 weeks.
Yes.
All right. So that's it for now, everybody. Thank you for watching, and whether you're watching live or if you're watching later or listening, we appreciate it, and we'll be back. So in the meantime, go watch good movies.
Enjoy it.